Okay, I want to show you some tips here. If you're trying to do coil springs on a G-Body or a Chevy S10, this is the trick that I've always used. Now, you know you're going to have to use that center pull press, and unless if you're using the Snap-on, because honestly, I've never had the Snap-on one. It costs way too much money. I'd rather figure out a way to make it work without breaking my bank. But I'm sure it uses a stronger center rod material that probably you could just cram the shit out of it. But when you're using like just a basic, what you'd get from Harbor Freight or a loaner tool, it's really not going to want to compress the springs down on its own. You could feel that it really starts stressing out. And, even if you're sitting there and you're lubricating the threads and keeping them lubricated, you could just feel that the resistance is uncomfortable. And I mean, you stress the metal and you're probably going to strip out the teeth. I mean, if you want to take that chance, go for it. Go ahead and make a spring explode in your face. But at any rate, here's the trick that I've used. This is about probably the 6th time I've done this, and it always works. These set are even harder because they're the heavy duty springs. So I took out, I want to say they're like 1,540 pound springs, and I put in the Moog 5662, and I mean, they're really stiff. They jump up to, what is it, 1715, 1900. I don't know. I'll splice it in here. But at any rate, these are a bear. I mean, I feel the difference. I really feel the difference. So if you're sitting there and you're trying to get these in and all you got's that center tool, here's the trick, okay? First off, you're going to have to do some type of shim. And I just kind of rigged it with some leftover conduit I had from Electrical Works projects and some washers. There's a lot of ways to shim it. You can figure that out on your own, But at any rate, I'd say basically it's the length of my pointer finger. I'd say probably a good 3 inches or so. But once you do that, you're going to want to set it up, okay? And now here's where the other bitch comes in. Okay, there's the end of the spring right there, right? Now, that's going to have to face away from you on an angle about like that, because it's got to line up between the 2 holes on the lower control arm. Okay? And when you go to do this, it's a lot easier. I wish I had my tripod. Let me put it back down or lean it. It's a lot easier if you keep this lower part. There goes the erratic camera. You want to keep this lower part from getting pinched in here. Because I could tell you one thing. One way, when you do this, if this gets too pinched, as soon as you try to put those A-arms together, you're going to have to break them back apart with the jack under it to be able to expand this enough once you remove this with it in the vehicle to get this to be able to hammer it this way. And normally this has never been a problem for me. I just, I could just beat it out. But this makes it the problem. I'm using this energy suspension kit. I'll go ahead and post up a part number. I don't remember it and I can't find the box right now. But this urethane, even though it's pretty tough, it's going to make a pocket. And ask me how I know. It did it on the other side. First time I've never been able to not beat this out. So I literally had to let the A-arm down quite a bit with the jack under it. And then, of course, you're in that situation where there's super, super, super high tension springs. Your car wants to jack up. And unless if you got like a T-bar that's sunk into your concrete or another way of, mounting your vehicle down, you're just going to jack your vehicle off the jack stands. So, I mean, I got around it. I used a tie strap, which actually I'll throw that in here at the end. But I just wanted to warn you about that, especially when using these. The other thing is, when you go to install these energy suspensions, Because again, they don't give you any directions with them. There's no videos, that kind of bullshit. You can't hammer it in. Like, you know how normally when you get under there and you get your spring compressed and you can kind of like kick it into place, or you can kind of, you know, bang it into place. You can't do that because I already split a little bit on my other side. Fortunately, I had a second set, but I already split. Let me get under here. Right about there, it started the split. Because it did not like being beat in there, you know. So I literally had to just lower the control arm to the point where it didn't take a whole lot and all that kind of bullshit. Now, you guys that are doing the lower trucks where you cut out a coil, you're probably not going to have any issues. You could probably even just get away with using the center one. Using the stock tensions, I'd still recommend doing it this way because it's still quite a bit. I mean, there's a huge difference, and you notice it when you upgrade to these super stiff ones. But at any rate, let me give you an idea for reference here. By the time you get it compressed, let me get this all lined up. There's your difference right there. It's almost like if you were to lob a coil off. You know, I mean, you're gonna get that sucker pretty damn compressed. You know, and if you get it like that, it's gonna make life a lot easier. Just remember, it's dangerous. You got a lot of tension on that motherfucker, and you don't want to kill yourself. But I mean, sometimes it's part of the game. You kill yourself, you go to the doctor. It's 2018. Doctors will probably fix you. But you may be gimping around for the rest of your life, and that would kind of suck. So be careful. I use an impact. Every single one of these are going to tell you, you know, don't use an impact. Well, guess what? You go ahead and do it without an impact and get back to me. You're going to use an impact. They do that for liability issues. You know, then if you do hurt yourself, all they're going to do is have an investigation, and they're going to look at the end under your socket, and they're going to know by how beat up it was you used an impact, and bam, their lawyers are going to fight that you didn't use the product as intended, and they're good to go. But at any rate, I've used an impact. Like I said, I've done it 6 times on this tool, and actually I'm getting to the point now. It's about a 25-year-old tool. I've overused it. This is the last time I'm probably going to trust it. I'll probably buy a fresh one. But knock on wood, no problems. If it blows up in my face this time around, oh well. At least I got 5 other times out of it. But, so at any rate, you're going to take like what you would use on McPherson's. Or I should say, a style you can use on McPherson. Because usually you'd use the scissor jaws, which I don't think I have. Yeah, I got mine boxed up. But at any rate, this works with the McPherson's too. You know, you could kind of use this in conjunction with the scissor jaws. But after you get the center in, you know, and you're bzzz, and you could tell you're starting to hit resistance, throw these bitches on the sides, and then, you know, evenly just kind of bzz, 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 work it down a little bit, and then go back and tighten your center. Bzz, 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 and you're going to know, because eventually you're going to get to where this has that same sense of too much resistance and you can't get it anymore. You know, and keep in mind, you can always test it out. You know, if you get to where you think it's good, try to install it, see if you look like you got enough room. But at any rate, that's the trick that I use. Remember, you know, on new springs, your white paint's always going to be your upside. But where's the top? I didn't see any energy suspension videos, so let me put this on pause. Okay, yeah, I found it. It was still in the box because I just got done doing the other side. So you're going to have that one for the top. You're going to have this one for the bottom. It's not easy to get on without some petroleum jelly. I use the Walmart's cheapy shit, and they were still not easy to get on. But I went ahead and I just, you know, I lubricated the spring, and then I was able to slide them on. You'll figure that out, and then, you know, when it's all done, it's going to push most of the shit out on this end, and then you just, you know, wipe it off. And then it's still on there pretty firm. but depending on how rough you are trying to install it, it might shift a little bit, so you got to keep an eye on it. You know, you want to try to keep it pretty close to the end, or even, you know, maybe have the end stick out like 1/8 of an inch or so. I got lucky on my other one and it was perfect. But here's the actual ones I'm using now that I have the box. These Energy Suspension 9.6102R. So, and they are pretty nice. I mean, you could feel the quality in them. So, here's my installed one. Kind of give you an idea of how it's going to look. Don't have much light on there, do I? But, yeah. So, now the next thing you're going to want to do, this is going to be fun without a tripod, right? Let's see. I guess I'll lean it again for the camera. Okay, so you have your top, right? Go ahead and tape that on there. Personally, I like electrical tape. I mean, that's what I used. And I know electrical tape's pretty durable. You could probably use a little Scotch tape, but it may or may not come off depending on what's going on. So, hold on and let me go ahead and throw that on. Okay, I went ahead and, oh, there goes my tape. Went ahead and threw some electrical tape on there. This is the good quality tape, by the way. It's what the telephone company uses. 3M makes it. It's high quality. It doesn't, you know, it's not the PVC based shit that gets all hard, kind of like our airlines do when it's cold out. And I got a 35-degree day today, so that makes life easier. But at any rate, there you go. I took about this one I could have taped a little better. I'll probably redo that. But at any rate, I took 2 8-inch strips and I just fed them around. And then there you go. That's going to hold your top hat in place. Because otherwise, I guarantee you, that is going to be a bitch if you don't do it that way. Unless if you got a helper. I know most people have helpers. I do all this by myself. So I got to find creative ways to make it work. But there you go. So now basically I'm going to go ahead and this one I wish I had a tripod. But you know what? It would be a boring video. I've already wasted 12 minutes of your time. I'm just, you know, now I'm going to use the jack under the A-arm. I'm going to get it close. I'm going to go ahead and try to fish that part in. You know, and then it's just normal spring installation. This is the hard part and the dangerous part because you got to get that high tension spring put down. So let me go ahead and leave you there. I don't think I have anything else I have to add right now. Okay, so when you get ready to install it, have a jack ready. Have your spring ready. You know, try to always have it, if possible, facing, you know, long ways away from you. So if it lets go, you're not in the direct path of where it's going to be hyper unexpanding. But I found the easiest way for me, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, well, a handful. Go ahead and take your spindle off, okay? And when you go to do it, and this is where an extra set of hands really makes things go quicker, and why I'm not going to keep it on record. But you're going to go ahead, and you're going to get it close, and then you're going to lift that A-arm, and when you get to where it's holding it enough that it's not going to be falling out on you, but you can kind of position it and tweak it and fuck with it, then you're going to lift your jack underneath. If you're doing new suspension, I put all Pro Forged and, you know, all the urethane mounts on there and, you know, did my uppers and lowers. If you're doing all that, I highly recommend that you don't take and put any of your grease fittings in there. You know, you could risk breaking it, especially when you're screwing around with the jack and the bottom one. I mean, I guess if you already put them in and you don't want to take them out, you could use a 2x4, maybe even take like a 3/8" drill bit and, you know, drill out a spot in the 2x4 that would fit over it. But I mean, I would just recommend taking it out or not even using it. So, because usually if you do your springs, you're wanting to do up everything else because springs aren't fun. Anybody who's done it that hasn't had cheap tools or a shop or a lift or an anchor system, they'll tell you springs just fucking suck, you know. I guess it would have been nice to show the 2 holes. Ah, it's facing my head. I'm going to blow up. Okay. You look right there, okay? See those 2 holes? And it's probably something you already know, but I might as well throw it in there. You need that coil where it ends. You know, that piece right there. It needs to come basically anywhere in the middle of these 2 holes. I usually like to try to get it right to the left side of this second hole clockwise. You know, where it's not covering the hole, but it's right up to that hole. That's just my personal preference. It's where I've always done it. I've never had an issue with it. Oh yeah, I just dumb fucked. Got ready to put it in and was so busy playing with my videos, I forgot to take the outside ones off. So don't do that. I guess it's made it quite a bit more safer this whole time that I've been wrestling it, but yeah, these gotta naturally come off before you pop it in there. So, but I retarded and I didn't say that before I got over here. Okay, there you go. So what I basically did, I'm sitting here Indian style, right? And I go ahead and I use my right hand and I lift the spring up into place. You can kind of feel it set in there, you know? And as I felt it set into the top, you know, they got those that little channel where it fits into. Then I take my left hand while I'm holding the spring and I lift this up. I don't hold it perfectly until this starts to contact this. Then I don't have to worry as much about how I'm holding with my right hand. Once I do that, I can now let go of the spring with my left hand and I can go slightly up and down with this, and I can kind of feel out what I'm going to do to try to get that to line up. Now again, light's not awesome, but you can see the light peeking in. But that's what we're talking about right there. And I'm actually OCD, so I'll probably try to get that to move about, well, no, the spring line's right up to it. Yeah, because my spring's popping out 1/8 of an inch, and I'm about 1/8 of an inch from the hole with my urethane, but my spring's perfectly to the right to the edge of the start of that last hole there. So, as you can see, I got my jack holding it in the place. It was a lot easier because we scrunched the shit out of the spring first. The other thing I do, once I get in the position, I don't have a helper. So I had to basically come up, shift my body, and as I'm holding, I got my knees keeping the jack in place. I already had this pre-tightened, you know, because it's probably going to be where you left it when you release the tension. And then I can go ahead, and while I'm holding with this hand, I can go ahead and use this hand, and I can jack it into place. So once you get to that point, you're in pretty good shape. It's an awkward fitment with the urethane piece on there, but the more you put tension on there, the more you see it's going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and lift that up. Okay, I went ahead and jacked it up probably about 2 or 3 inches. You'll know because the spring will really start seating into there. Let's see if I could get a little better light on that for you. But yeah, it'll really start seating into there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my spindle back on. And I'm going to let it hang from the top, but I'm not going to fully put it on the top because if I screwed up or down the road I'm not able to get that center, you know, spring compressor out, I don't want to have to worry about taking my brand new ball joints and then hammering and banging and, you know, fork picking the shit apart and, you know, fatiguing a brand new part. Hold on. Alrighty, the next step I do before I put the spindle on, I go ahead and I take some anti-seize, you know, use an acid brush if yours doesn't come with a built-in acid brush. And I go ahead and I wipe the mating surface, you know, where it's going to go up against the ball joint. And it's probably overkill, but I do it anyways. But you definitely want to put some in the middle there. It's just going to make it a lot easier for you or the next guy down the road that has to replace it. As you can see, I go ahead and do the lower ball joint part too. Again, it's probably overkill to do the surface, but you figure the boot's going to mash up against there. And, you know, there's a lot of articulation in that control arm. And I think that'll also give you the lubrication for the boot. I mean, you could probably just use grease. That'd probably be better. I don't think it really matters since you don't even need to use it. That's just how I'm feeling like doing it this time. And I also slather up the upper ball joint. I'll do the lower one too, but I'll do that after I actually get the top on. Doesn't matter which way you do it, but you know, if you do it last chance of dust and particulate getting on it. Okay, so I went ahead and I got my spindle hanging from the upper ball joint. All I did was hold it into place with enough force that I felt it bottom out, except for it, you know, it didn't press into the little, you know, cone-shaped part of the spindle that's going to, you know, make it really press on there. And I went ahead and spun the nut on, and as you can see, it's got plenty of nuts, so it's not going to strip the threads. You know, it's actually sticking out a little bit, but I would at least make sure all the threads are on there. I mean, this may vary depending on what ball joint brand you use. Now I'm going to go ahead and slather up that lower one. Okay, I went ahead and slathered up that lower one. Some people are going to say, oh, no, don't use anti-seize. It's, what's the word? It's abrasive. You don't want that getting in you're not going to get it in your ball joint. As soon as you grease the fittings, it's going to push everything out, and it's going to push all that away, and grease is going to work its way right into where that was. It's never going to find its way in there. Another tip, not required, but it may help you. The better your ball joints, the higher the quality. It's harder to actually move the threaded part of it. So before you even put your spring in, you could actually, you know, mock this up into place, the spindle, and then kind of just eyeball it to get it close so that when you go to jack up, you know that you're not going to have to move it a whole lot. So now, as you can see, I'm going to have to fuck with it a little bit because my socket is way too close to the wall. Why is my socket on there, you ask? Because my tool's getting pretty beat up, so I actually grinded it down and used the size smaller socket and hammered it on there. But at any rate, you know, when you're putting this piece on, the more centered you get it, the better. But with that being said, you're going to see when you play with it too centered, your spring's not going to compress evenly. You know, it's going to bow to one side. Now, if you could make that happen and have it bow towards the inside, installation's a lot easier. I haven't had luck with that. You know, Murphy's Law, it always wants to bow out the other way. I mean, that's how long you have to want to play with it. But I just wanted to show you that because when I went to jack it up, I'm still about a good inch away because of my socket. So naturally, the first thing I'm going to do is see if I can pound it in and just have it clear that. Okay, no problems there. You know, I just used a 8-inch extension and a hammer, gave it a little tap because only about a 1/16 of it was catching, and it just shifted right into place. So now this is another situation where, as you can tell, I am now lined up. I am just barely in that hole. You have to hold the A-arm, you know, to line up that hole. So again, I'm using my left hand to steer the A-arm, to oh, I'm going stupid on you guys. Spindle. I'm go ahead and use my right hand so I can jack it. And as soon as I get it close, now I can go ahead and let go of that and continue jacking. Okay, as you can see, now everything appears to be perfect, right? You can see I got that coming up about close to 1/2 of an inch. Plenty of room that I could go ahead and spin my castle nut on there, and everything's in place. But remember, you still got that tool in the center. Now there's 2 ways I could have done this. As soon as I had the spring in place and I had the jack basically holding the spring in, and I'm going to rewind here. Remember when you took the old one out and you let the A-arm down and the spring was kind of stuck and you had to take a pry bar and kind of work it out? That same position. You know, once it's in that position, you don't necessarily need to have your spring compressor in place, but it makes it a hell of a lot easier because all I did was jack it up and get to that point. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and spin a castle nut on there and see if I'm able to get off my tool. Now this is the point I was talking about. If this part is too far, let's say I went clockwise towards, you know, where the coils get tighter, you know, because it lifts up the more you go counterclockwise. If that was pinching, I'd be screwed. I couldn't get it out. Now my other side, I had it just a little bit too tight. So what I basically had to do was take this step, take the tool off, lower the arm enough that the spring, you know, expanded enough to get my tool out. But then when I went to put everything back up, this right here was still about 1 inch apart. And I had to use a ratchet strap that I took both hook parts and I put it on my, what do you call that part again? I put it on that center rod part and I looped it around and I came under the control arm, had the ratchet strap where I could do it right there, and then back up to that same spot. I'm hoping I get lucky, and with everything in place the way it is right now, I'm going to go ahead and try to get that center tool out, which, because I have good geometry this time, it should work out good. Then if that's the case, and, you know, I leave my castle nut in place, which actually I'll go ahead and I'll spin that into place right now. Like so. And again, if I crank the shit out of that and then say, oh, damn, I can't get my tool out, guess what? I'm taking my brand new ball joint and I'm pickle forking the fuck out of it. And that's unnecessary. You know, right now this is not pressed in. It's just holding it enough that everything's not going to go kabooey. And this lower castle nut's a lot thicker. So even though I don't have it sticking out like that one, and I'm probably a thread short, it's got enough beef. It's girthy. It's going to be just fine. So let me go ahead and take my tool out. Okay, boy, I really got to start keeping my tripod at the shop. Give you a view from this side, right? So we're all in place. Of course, this moves real freely because, you know, nothing's been torqued down yet. Now this does make life a little easier, having the socket wedged down there, I'm not gonna lie, because now I know for sure I can access that tool. If that socket wasn't on there, the tool, the nut that's, you know, on the end of the tool, it could be clear of the hole, but it could be so close to this side that I couldn't get my socket on. So that is kind of a fringe benefit of doing it that way, because otherwise you're going to have to mess with it, maybe rip it apart, all that kind of stuff. Which goes back to how important it is, and I stress, don't snug this shit down until you know you have everything in place and you have that tool out. Now I'm just going to go ahead. I already took some oil and I oiled down the threads on the center of that again, and I'm going to impact it, even though they tell you not to, because that's how I'm going to do it. There you go. Now it's all loose. And I'm actually almost getting it with one hand. Now I'm going to have to go in with 2 hands. But if you can't fish it out, you'll have to just take the rod all the way out, let the jaws, the set of jaws stay in there, and then fish them out. So I'm going to go ahead and do what I have to do to get the jaws out now. Okay, I had success. My tool came out, and I still have my spindle mocked up in place. So now, at that point, I would probably be okay to go ahead and torque my top and bottom. That's how I've always done it in the past. But I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw the ratchet strap on there. And the reason I'm going to do it is, A, I want to show you guys what I did when I fucked up my position on my other side and I couldn't get the tool out, and I had to expand the A-arm and, lose all that. Because notice already, just the position that I'm in, I'm off my jack stand, And that's what would happen. You would push yourself off the jack stand trying to come back up if you didn't keep that nut in there. Really, I wouldn't be off the jack stand. I could put it back on my jack stand. I'm not too worried about it at the moment. But, I still jacked it up as high as I could go until it did what it lifted, which you saw how high I was able to get it. Just like that. That's about a 1/16 of an inch from being flush with the top level of the castle nut. So let me go ahead and mock up the cable straps. I'm not having a good day. The ratchet straps so you could see what I mean. Now, okay, here we go, right? Hopefully you can see that okay. So basically, I got my ratchet strap around there. I got it over here where I got a lot of room, and I could actually ratchet it. I'm using my cheapie. They're not the high quality ones. Nice thing about the cheapies, those little hooks fit perfectly on that part that I can't remember the name. Why can't I remember the name? I just got done doing a video not too long ago and talking about that. Oh well, at any rate, if you use the heavier duty straps, they're probably going to ratchet a lot easier for you. You just got to make sure those hooks fit, or use another hook and then hook the hook to the hook. You're going to have to rig it up. But at any rate, you can actually see, let me move my evap canister line out of the way here. No, it's not. It's going to be an issue. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Now see how we got that gap right there? Now, if I try to torque down, and I'm especially worried about the upper one because it's just not as beefy as the lower one. If I try to torque that castle nut down, I have to compress the spring based on the torque of that castle nut. So it's kind of like what we did when we used the double spring compressor method to compress the spring so we didn't fatigue out the center compressor, right? Now watch how that flexes. I don't know if you can see that through the video, but basically what I'm going to do, and yeah, these cheap ones, if you overdo them, they will break. That's a sense of feel that, either you're going to break one, or you're smart enough to know, or you've done it enough that you got a sense of feel. I'm going to snug it to where I think I'm right before ripping this. I'm going to tighten up the castle nut. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to snug this up. I'm going to tighten up the castle nut. Snug it. I'm going to keep doing that. It's not going to take that many times until I go ahead and hit my torque, which is going to be 50 foot-pounds on that top one. Except for I won't actually set the torque. I'll get it close. I'll come back to the bottom one. Well, let's just see. Maybe I'll go ahead and do the top one first. Okay, I went ahead and torqued the top one down. Did my little ratchet thing. It torqued effortlessly. Basically, I was able to get it to where it just, firmed up and didn't take a whole lot to hit 50 foot-pounds. Now, that doesn't mean I'm done. After you do that, you need to have the hole lining up to be able to get your cotter pin through. So you're going to have to tighten it a little bit more until you get to the next hole. Now, depending on, again, I got ProForge stuff so I can push it a little bit. I tried doing that once on some cheap $6 nylon ball joints and I didn't have very good luck. I stripped out my castle nut. That was cheap shit. So, I mean, you could back it off a little bit, probably especially if you're just, on the hole, but you're off by a little bit. But ideally, I think you should probably tighten it a little more till your holes line up. Now, I'm going to throw in another one of those steps that I shouldn't have mentioned it earlier. I'm doing springs. But if you are doing your ball joints, you want to try, before you press this on, you could put like a small, like a high-speed steel, a strong drill bit or something through that hole, and you can turn it. You want to turn it so that when that spindle, when you're looking at it from the side, you want the hole to be right there facing you. That way, not only can you easily tap with the little hammer from that way, but when you take your spindle from that way, you can also go ahead and take a pair of vice grips, which is how I like to do them, and then right on that side have plenty of room to snap your vice grips on there, and then you can hammer your vice grips back and take it out. I'll actually show you later the proper way to put a cotter pin in. Most people don't do it. They either don't know, or you got Midas doing it, and Midas doesn't give a shit because he's being, paid per job and he just needs to get it done. But all I can tell you is if that cotter pin, if one of the holes was facing like the spindle, that could be a real pain in the ass, because then you'd have to put it in from the back, and that's not too bad. But when you got to go to get it out and you're trying to get that bend out and that kink out, you have no room to either try to straighten it out with vice grips, or to do this other trick where you basically choke up on the vice grips, leave a 16th, tap, undo the vice grips, choke up on the vice grips, the 16ths, tap, which is, the way you do it when they're really bad. But at any rate, as you can see, I got to go ahead and spin mine a little tiny bit more. So I'm going to do that now. Oh, another tip before I forget. When I had my torque wrench in there, and I'm going clockwise, but it seems like it's going counterclockwise because everything's upside down, the lever on this driver's side is coming towards me. So naturally, it's easier, rather than going from this side where the spindle's going to want to turn, go ahead and move your spindle like that, and then go from this side, and then the spindle, doesn't have to be that way. It's just a little bit easier, in my opinion. See, I just wanted to show you. Now, I already screwed mine up. I was so busy worrying about my video that before I positioned it, I pressed it into place. So see now when I go to put my cotter pin, and I got my little flathead going through there. Now I'm going to have to go that way, which means I'm going to have to, because I'm not going to undo it. I'm not beating this out. I'm not fucking that boot up. So I'm going to have to put it in. Then when the cotter pin bottoms out, I'm going to have to take a flathead screwdriver, bend it down a little bit. Oh, you can't see very good. Tap the cotter pin in more, bend it down, tap it in more, bend it down. And the worst thing is I'm going to have to bend the whole cotter pin instead of half of it, which is part of the trick. You only are supposed to bend half the cotter pin, not the whole thing. But everybody always fucks up and bends the whole thing. But at any rate, what that means is when I go to get that cotter pin out, I'm never going to get, I'll never get the metal straight because I can't get my tools on this part to get it straight. So basically your best bet once you do that, you would bend it as much as you could, and then you would take a cutoff wheel and you would just bzz, 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 bzz. You'd try to cut and just leave a little bit of a nub, and then at least on this back part you could still get a set of vice grips on there, or long nose. You're probably going to need vice grips because of the bend, and then you could tap it out back like that. But yeah, there you go. I just did exactly what I talk about, and I've never fucking done it before. Well, I did my first time I ever did a set of ball joints before I realized, after I took them out the next time, hey, I don't want to do that to myself. But I just wanted to show you that. See, on Sean for Big Blocks Productions, we show you the mistakes too. I think that's fair. You don't want to cut that shit out. Now you see what I'm talking about if you're new to this. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to come at the bottom. I think I told you what the top was. It was 19. Well, the bottom is 22 millimeter. Or at least Pro Forged. For the S10 and the G-Body, it's the same shit. But I have a feel... Oh, I got lucky. I guess this one I already turned, so this one lines up perfectly. You know, literally right there, that's where my cotter pinhole is. So I either forgot to do the top one, because I probably prepped them the day I put the ball joints in. I did that like a few days ago, and then, you know, of course the project sat till I had time to do it. But at any rate, maybe that turned on me. I don't know. All I know is it pisses me off because it would be a perfect installation if I didn't fuck that up. Okay, so at any rate, your bottom lower ball joint, 83 foot-pounds, at least for my application. You know what sucks? I got a nice, big old heavy-duty Craftsman torque wrench. I've owned it twice. I got about 10 years out of the first one. I got about another 10 out of the second one. You know, up until I bought that one back in the day, I always used these little cheapies, and here I am. This is my backup one, or my, you know, my small one, and I got to run an adapter, and, well, I don't have to, but, you know, because of the threaded rod sticking out, it fits a lot better than if I use a 3/8 inch drive, so I got my 3/8 adapter. This only goes up to 80 foot-pounds. I need 83, so I'm just going to set it to 80 and then give it a little extra heave-ho. Not the best way to do it, but I don't have $200 for a torque wrench. And ironically, it's, September 12th? Craftsman went out of business October 15th. So, I don't know. I'm seeing commercials about Lowe's being selling Craftsman tools. But to be honest with you, Craftsman tools have been kind of going down the shitter. I don't think I'm going to go that route for my next torque wrench. I'll actually show you a picture of the company that I think I'm going to use, because I bought a 1/4 inch one from them and I was pretty happy with it. But at any rate, okay, this time, you know, now I'm going clockwise because everything's right. It's not upside down. So I went ahead and turned out everything to the left here, and now I can go ahead and I can come in. Go ahead and give it 83 foot-pounds, or as we already talked about, 80 foot-pounds, and across your fingers that you get 83 or close to it. And then I'm going to, of course, have to keep going until I line up with my castle nut. Now, if you're using cheap shit, again, be careful on that castle nut, but this Pro Forge stuff's just been absolutely beautiful. I love it. You know, some people complain because it's made in China, but remember, being made in China isn't bad, as long as it's an American design with an American company overseeing how it's made in China. What we don't like is the Chinese companies that copy off the American made in China shit, or made in USA shit, or whatever. Nothing's made in the USA anymore, and they do it as cheap as they can and try to call it the same thing. Big difference. So remember, China's not bad, but aspects of China are bad. You don't want to have bad aspects of China. Pro Forged is not a bad aspect of China. If it was made in the USA, that ball joint that cost me $45, it probably cost me $150, and we don't want to do that. So let me go ahead and torque this up. See, now there you go. I don't know if you can see that. I probably can't get the light right. There you go. See how that hole, the castle nut needs to move to the right, but we don't want to loosen it if we don't have to. That's that position you really hope doesn't happen. You want it where you just barely nudge it clockwise. Well, that's more than a just barely nudge. You know, now that happened on my other side too. It was actually almost in the same place. With the Pro Forge nut, I'm going to trust it. I'm going to over torque it, and I'm going to line it up to that next hole. But again, be careful with the cheap ones. You know, those $6, you know, plastic-based ball joints, I wouldn't do it. There you go. Now you can see what I mean. Everything lines up. See how it's parallel to the spindle. like it ideally is supposed to be if you're OCD about shit and give a fuck about the next guy ripping it apart. And I didn't use my torque wrench when I positioned it, you know, because you don't want to beat up your torque wrench. At that point, I just switched over to a regular half-inch drive ratchet, and I went ahead and did it. I didn't need to use a pipe on the end or anything. I was able to do it pretty easily. 83 foot-pounds on that size of a nut is really not that bad. So, and then naturally, you know, as long as your ball joints are good, you should have a nice stiff, where it requires a little bit of energy. You can tell everything's real stiff. So, what I'm going to do now, this is done. I'll go ahead and take the ratchet strap off. I'll go ahead and reline this up since I bumped into it, because as you can see, everything's off right now. And it's done. I can throw everything back together. So, unless if I have something else that I need to splice in, I think that's about it. Thanks for watching. Sorry it's so long, but as always, you could fast forward, but I don't want to be that guy that doesn't show you the hard shit or leaves something out or whatever. You know, you got to go through all my babbling, but you're going to figure out every little step and every little thought and every afterthought and all that kind of stuff. That's the purpose of my videos. It's not to make money, it's to help somebody out. Thanks for watching. Okay, what we're going to go over now is the correct way to install a cotter pin. This is another one of my pet peeves because literally 99.9 repeating percent of the time when I see a fucking cotter pin, it's done wrong. And this drives me nuts because, you know, it's a simple thing. Even if you do it wrong, it's going to work as designed. But it's not always the fact that you can do it. I mean, you know, when you're 12 years old and you get something done, hey, look, Mom, no hands. You know, you can be proud. But as you progress as a mechanic, you also want to have the pride of doing things right, doing things better. I have not seen another one of these videos, so I'm going to be the lame duck that makes this video because it pisses me off that people don't do this right. So when you look at a cotter pin, have you ever noticed that right on the edge there, you got that little part of the cotter pin that's notched out where one's shorter than the other side? You think they do that for their health? You think they do that because they're trying to save on metal times 2 million cotter pins? No, they're not. They're doing that for leverage. When you install a cotter pin, you want the longer side to go up. Okay? And I'm going to show you this. Now, when you go to put it in, seeing as though you've already lined everything up so that you're in a good position to remove it next time, meaning the hole, it's nice to have the hole parallel with the spindle, or at least depending on your situation, you want the hole in an ideal way for future cotter pin maintenance. So I'm going to take my cotter pin, if I could make my camera focus, and when I put it in there, I want that longer side up, okay? Just like that. And the reason is, when I go to set my cotter pin, now I can actually get my finger under one side. See how I did that? And I can push it over just like that. See how I did that? Notice I did not bend up both sides of the cotter pin. That's retarded shit, and it's going to make it that much harder to get it out, especially if shit starts getting rusty and after it's been in there for a while. Hardly anybody knows that trick, but that's how you're supposed to do it. That's why the notch is there. Then when I go to take that out, I only have one of them to bend back, the other one straight, which is already going to make it easier to yank out, and I can use my vice grips, and I can pretty much, when I bend that other side out, I can squeeze the two together, and the one that's straight is going to serve as like a guide to straighten the other one out. It's that simple. It's that simple. And that is the proper way that you put in a cotter pin. Oh yeah, I told you I wouldn't be done, right? Always something to add. You know, even though it's more part of my other video, let me just go ahead and show you. You know, I use the energy suspension, and I'm actually, let me give you all the part numbers now. I'm really happy with it. It turned out really good. You know, the depressing thing is, you know, I had to do a lot of work to this truck, and I'm not in a position right now. I don't have the time. I don't have the money to paint it. There's nothing more horrible than ripping things apart and not being able to paint it. And to be honest with you, I'm getting old enough now. You don't want to paint the shit. Unless if it's going to be a trailer queen, powder coat it. You know, take all these parts and powder coat it. Take it down to the frame, powder coat it. But at any rate, what I wanted to talk about here, a little bit of dust on there. Thought I had that clean. I wanted to talk about when I put in these control arm bushings. You know, I put in the control arm bushings, energy suspension, top notch, the ball joint, Pro Forged, top notch. I mean, it's real tempting to just go buy new A-arms. You could probably get them for what, 80 bucks, 100 bucks a side or something like that. Keep in mind that first off, you're going to get like the equivalent of, you know, Asian control arms. You're not going to get like a heavy duty GM pig iron, you know, muscle car style. You're not going to get that. So it's like, even though it's already painted and done for you, I just don't think it's as nice. And it's like, unless if you're going tubular, stick with this and either paint it or powder coat it. You know, you're not going to get them with the energy suspension bushings in them anyways. You're not going to get them with a Pro Forged ball joint. So it's like, go ahead, clean this stuff up. Just don't be poor like me and not paint it, you know. And I mean, you can see it. It's beautiful, you know. It's beautiful. It'll do the trick. But I just wanted to throw that in there. One last thing I want to add. I did notice that I shifted a little bit. The end of the red of the urethane is going over the second hole. And of course, initially I'm like, oh shit. It's all good. It just pinched the urethane. So the spring itself is right where it should be, but the urethane goes about 1/8 of an inch past the spring. So my other side didn't do that. It actually did the opposite. It actually went up the spring a little bit, but I guess on this side it came off the spring a little bit. So, you know, if you freak out and see that, make sure you're looking at the actual spring inside of it where its position is, not just the red urethane.